2 days before I got married, one of my best friends sent me an article, and it was about a couple that got divorced. Now, what the judge did, he gave the wife 86% of the marital estate, gave the husband 14%, but let the husband pick any 14% he wanted. He took, TVs and cars and things like that. Thought, what if that would ever be me? I would take my 14%, but only if it's going to directly affect her 86%. What, you want the dryer? Fine, I want the dryer door. You want the truck? Fine, I'll take the brakes.
If you've been looking for a church to attend or a ministry to get involved with, we have a very special program for you today. Hello and welcome to Ministry Connections. I'm Evangelist Patrick Hoban, the local ministry director here at Salem and AM 980 The Mission. Each week on Ministry Connections, we spotlight a church or a local ministry so that you can get to know them just a little bit better. Now, if you know of a church or a ministry that you would like us to feature and highlight, just call the station or drop us an email at comments@salemtc.com. Now, you can also follow us on our Facebook or YouTube pages. Just look for AM 980 The Mission, and you can see past and present programs there. Now, we have a very important program for you today. I have with me Bonnie Gasper of the Child Protection League. This is a tremendously important subject today, and I really want you to listen up for what we're going to talk about. Welcome to the program, Bonnie.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure, and it's so important right now as we come up to the elections. But before we get into the subject today, tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you local from Minnesota? Where do you come from?
I am a born and raised farm girl from Minnesota, so grew up with that work ethic. I have a bunch of siblings. I myself am married for 35 years as of last Monday to my husband, and we have 3 adult children. I don't know if you call them kids anymore or kidults or how that works, but one is 30, teaching overseas English. Then I have boy-girl twins. One's a nurse and one's an engineer, and we've been very blessed as a family. But yes, I am a local. I've lived here my whole life, and I got involved in this group about 10 years ago, but got involved in educational issues about 25 years ago.
So educational issues, and as we know, forming a child's mind is so important, right? And what's happening right now is that the children's minds are not being formed the way we think that they could be. Tell us how important it is for parents to know what's happening right now.
Well, that's such a key point, and that's really how I got involved. So I started kind of, when my daughter was first getting ready for kindergarten, I just started to pay attention. I hadn't really been paying attention to what was going on in school until I took a look. Well, I started listening to people like Michelle Bachman. At the time, she was going around the state talking about the profile of learning, and I thought, what in the world is a profile of learning? It sounded very different than anything I'd ever heard about in terms of when I went to public school. And so I came to find out that it really is nothing related to what we're talking about. So it kind of laid the groundwork for what we're dealing with today. And so where we're at right now today basically speaks to the mission of our organization. So what we're trying to do, let's answer your question first, the mind of the child. So Scripture tells us to train up the children the way they should go, because when they're old, they will not depart from it. So the means we need to train them, we need to teach them. I mean, Deuteronomy is very clear about when you rise and when you rest and when you're walking. I mean, teaching them the doctrines and the fundamentals of the faith. And what's going on in school right now has nothing to do with Christianity or values. It's a total usurpation of all these Christian values and morals and Judeo-Christian heritage that we have. And that's because, and the reason the kids are being targeted is because they're malleable. They're very teachable. We like to say their minds are like wet cement. Whatever lands on them sticks, right? It's a permanent impression. And then education, they're in education from pre-K through college. So when you have kids marinating in a certain kind of an ideology or a curriculum or a content, they're bound to leave an impression.
Yes, it is. And our current state of confusion when it comes to basic natural law things, you don't even have to be a Christian to understand that natural law governs the universe, and when you usurp that, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Yes.
So speak about your organization. What is it? Why did it form? Why is it so important today?
Okay, so we formed back in 2013. It's kind of funny how we were talking earlier, but you form with an objective in mind, and God has bigger plans for you, right? So we formed to defeat the Safe and Supportive Schools Act in Minnesota, which was in 2013, and it was basically also known as the anti-bullying bill. So it was a very unpopular position to be against an anti-bullying bill, but we knew that bill was going to codify into law this huge bureaucracy through the Department of Education in Minnesota, as well as all the things we're fighting today. It was going to make protected classes of gender identity, people, certain gender identities, and based on your skin color as well. It was going to ultimately enforce compel speech by making everybody participate in this gender ideology platform, as well as using pronouns. It was undermining parental rights, and it was also introducing something called the social emotional learning educational strategies, which we were not familiar with at the time. But that has become really the conduit now that's brought in all of this, for lack of a better word, Marxist ideologies, these pedagogies like gender confusion and this critical race theory and, this systemic racism and all these kinds of things. All of that stuff is completely embedded into our curriculum now through social emotional learning.
Yeah, it's interesting, that it's interesting, this ideology, what it can't win through logical debate. Yes. Right? Because most people, if they get a logical debate, they would never go along with this.
Right.
But what they do is they tie in this emotional racism nonsense, really, and then they make people feel guilty for believing truth.
Right.
It's amazing. So, you're out there every day with people. How is this coming across with people? What's going on there on the ground?
Well, what's going on the ground is typically the audience that we're speaking to typically gets it. They're like my generation, maybe a little bit older. Some are a little bit younger because the young parents are still busy raising their kids. So we're not always getting those people into our immediate orbit to hear what's going on. And plus, they're just busy running their kids to sports and their programs and things like that. But we have many, many grandparents super concerned about what their grandkids are learning. And so we're finding that they get it. I guess here's to make it more clear. So parents see all these battles going on. They see pornographic books. They see drag queen story hour. They see their kids come home and they're like, oh, guess what? Sam is now Samantha, and I'm supposed to just call him Samantha, and I'm supposed to be okay with that, and they're not supposed to question it. I mean, they see all of this stuff going on, and they think these are all separate little battles, but they're not. They're all connected. They're all part of this huge battlefront in education, where the Marxists understood that if you can capture education, if you can change how children think and speak, you're going to create social change. And that's what they went after. Like when they embedded into academia 60 to 70 years ago, they recognized this was the number one battlefront to get into. Because if you can change then how kids think and speak, you will change what they believe, which is going to change their worldview, which is going to change what they stand for, fight for, and fall for. So that's what we're seeing as parents are recognizing that my kids are changing. They're starting to adopt and accept these things that don't make any sense. And plus, it's even creating so much cognitive dissonance for littles. I mean, imagine a little 6-year-old comes into kindergarten. She's perfectly content in her gender, but suddenly she's taught that it was assigned to her at birth, just random, that it's not based in fact. And then she has friends that are changing, or they're told that you can be whatever you want. The doctor might have made a mistake. I mean, it's just creating massive confusion for children.
I'm reminded of two scriptures, Bonnie. First of all, it says in the Old Covenant, "Woe to those who put light for darkness and darkness for light."
Yes.
And the other thing is too, if you lead any one of these little ones into temptation, it'd be better that a millstone was tied around your neck. And then I'm thinking about that, Paul said that God is not the author of confusion.
Correct.
And so what we have here is we have all of it happening at the same time. As a little kid, I always thought, in the last days, before the Lord returns, it's going to be horrendous and we're going to have a battle. But none of us thought how sinister this is. Because to attack the core of who you are is so amazing. You're listening to Ministry Connections on AM 980 The Mission, where we give you a better look of local ministries and churches in the area. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook. Just look for AM 980 The Mission. And I have a very special guest today. Her name is Bonnie Gasper from the Child Protection League, and we are discussing a very important topic today. Probably it should be on the mind of everybody. Just as we're kind of the last 5 minutes here, Bonnie, how important is it for people to know what's happening?
It's critically important for them to know what's happening. And that has been our core mission, is that we want to educate, we want to equip, and we want to activate the parents to understand what this is. These are not, again, like I said, isolated fronts. It's part of a core strategy to completely transform our culture by transforming their children. And what they're really doing is they're creating little kids to become these controllable, predictable activists that are going to champion the destruction of their own country. And they're going at it by, as you said, attacking their fundamental identity, because what that does, it also will destabilize the family. If the family structure is completely changed, where distinctives of male and female are erased, and that's not, there's nothing valuable or intrinsically beautiful about that, then you've destabilized the structure that you need for a stable society. And that's what Marxism is all about, is to destabilize a civilization.
So they can bring in control.
Control and change, yes.
And
yes.
It really is wicked at its core. And so when people are going out to vote, and they're voting already, I see the placards all around, and it's like, what has happened to the people that they can't actually see? It's like this blindness. But maybe through interviews and shows like this and your organization, maybe there can be blindness taken off. I know we need an awful lot of prayer. The church really preaching the gospel is the only real answer. I know that I have 2 sons, and they can see what's happening right now, and they don't want to be a part of this. So there is hope for this generation. Before we close here, the harm that this transgender stuff does to people, I think about this altering your own body. And then the consequences later on. We've all seen the videos that get silenced when, say, a woman, does mutilation to herself, basically, and then later on she comes to regret it, or vice versa. Right. Can you give us a story, a real tangible story, without naming names, of something like that you've witnessed yourself?
Well, I personally have not, but we know we work with a lot of physicians who have, right, or who have called this kind of thing out. And we are actually profiling a book right now called Lost in Translation by Miriam Grossman, who's detailing this from her practice. She's been at this for 40 years. And you're absolutely right. So most of the children who are going through this kind of mutilation are always, almost 90% of the time, have some other kind of underlying significant mental health issue. And that's not being treated. So they're doing the cosmetic, and they're also being told the false lie that you can just change your body by taking different hormones or doing surgeries. And the suicide rates remain persistently high for kids who go through this kind of stuff. But also, if they go through the puberty blockers, they've never had a chance to even go through puberty. So once they're on the other side of that, their bodies don't look right anymore anyway. So it's kind of like they don't even have an option at that point. It's like it's almost 100% of the time they've got to go through this. So there's countless stories of these poor children who come through this. They don't recognize their body anymore. They think, well, I've got to take the next step, and I've got to surgically alter myself. They can't make informed consent, right? They have no idea what these long-term consequences are about sterilizing themselves permanently and disfiguring their bodies, and the fact that, I don't want to be too graphic, but many of these surgeries require a lifetime of medication and a lifetime of procedures to be done to keep these open wounds open and things like that. There's just tremendous regret, and there's tremendous psychological damage. And these kids, when they try to come back out of it, I mean, they come out of it with these disfigured bodies, and it's a tragic situation.
Before we close here today, Bonnie, what is your website that they can connect with?
Okay, so we actually have kind of two. We have a research arm that is called CPLeducation.org, and that's where our research arm is done, and we do a lot of all of our information's on there as well. And then our CPL Action, which is more of our advocacy arm, but they're both very content dense. There's a ton of information on there. We communicate primarily through emails and radio and social media and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you, Bonnie, for coming in today. You've been listening to Ministry Connections here on AM 980 The Mission. Until next time, God bless you.